Thank you for joining us. My name is Julianne Rose and I'm a trainer with the Institute of Community Directors Australia. I would like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land from which the webinar is being presented here in Melbourne, the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation, and the traditional owners of the lands on which you are participating in this webinar right across the country. We've got a great mix of attendees from right across the country. And the webinar will go for about 40 minutes and about 20 minutes for questions. So the Institute of Community Directors Australia, an enterprise of our community, and the Australia Council are working together to provide a practical, tailored program of training to arts organisations. The program aims to support arts leaders to prosper and arts organisations to thrive. We recognise that arts organisations operate within a particular context and therefore teaching of arts organisation governance skills needs to be tailored accordingly. We'll be delivering a number of face-to-face sessions throughout the country and also a number of webinars on various topics that relate to good governance. If you'd like to find out more about the one-day workshops, go to the icta.com.au/artsgov website. We will send you the link straight after the webinar. We have a lot to get through today, so we'll be looking at why is governance important, what are our legal obligations, and what should we do in practice. There is no one ideal type or style of board. Each board needs to find the right fit for its organisation. The terminology we'll use today, when we say board, committee or subcommittee, they're all describing the same thing, so we'll use board. When we say director, board member or committee member, we're all also describing the same thing, so we'll use board member. And when we're talking about the CEO, the general manager or the artistic director, it could be one or two people or distinct or blended roles, so we'll use all those terms. There are different models for how people get on boards. Sometimes people are elected, sometimes appointed, and sometimes it's a mixed model. There are also lots of types of organisation structures: incorporated, company, for-profit, not-for-profit. The legal obligations that we'll talk about in this webinar are basically the same across all organisations with a legal status, no matter how your board members get to be board members. Now, I want to make sure that you know how to get involved during the webinar. So you can open or hide the control panel by clicking on the orange arrow. You can download a copy of the slides by clicking the handout section. While you cannot speak with us today, you have the opportunity to ask us questions, and you can submit your questions and comments via the questions panel. You may ask questions at any time throughout the webinar. We will compile questions as we go and we'll answer as many as we can at the end. We're committed to responding to all questions, so if we don't get to them all during the live webinar, we will send you a follow-up document in a few days. Today's presentation is being recorded and will be available for watching or sharing later. See the web link on your screen for where to go to watch it again later. So what do we mean by stewardship? Bringing people along with us, both a custodial role, recognising the past and its development, but also engaging with our community. In this webinar, we'll talk about the particular situation of an arts organisation, given that they often have a third wheel, the governing body, management, and the custodian of the artistic vision. All of these need to be working in concert. The size of Australian not-for-profit sector and increasingly strident calls for rationalisation and collaboration, and the arts are not immune, leads to the big getting bigger. Changes in government funding, shifts in focus and priority. Increased competition for funding, donations, volunteers, clients and audiences. Increasingly suspicious and demanding donors leads to demands for transparency, accountability and evidence of worth, value and impacts. new funding and purchasing arrangements, changes in the audience consumption models, free worldwide online content, streaming, etc. Workforce changes, casualisation, tech-fuelled adjustments and disruptions, new drivers for young workers. Changes to volunteers, demand for skills-based volunteering and professional management, fewer hours available. The changes and challenges can appear overwhelming, but good management paired with good governance can ensure an organisation stays on top of it all, thrives and survives. No single model fits every organisation, but good governance relies on an interplay between leadership, people and practice, with a number of overlaps between each. If one piece is missing, it could cause the organisation to be incomplete. Too many missing pieces will mean the picture ceases making sense. This webinar is not long enough to cover all of this, but each section of the Venn diagram is covered in the workshop in more or less detail. But you need to know that all of it is important. Your board may be fulfilling your legal duties, but if you are not showing leadership, you're not doing your job. So what gives you the power to meet and make decisions? Incorporation is the structure under which most arts organisations operate, but regardless of your structure, you will have a set of rules, your constitution, which are your governing instrument. These are not set in concrete, and as long as you are abiding by the Act under which you operate, these can and should be reviewed and changed if necessary. It might surprise a lot of people to know that no board or committee is required to meet monthly under the law, yet that's what we often do. We also see a lot of organisations put too many operational matters in their constitution. This is the purpose of policies, codes or bylaws. It's also important to recognise that you need to be on top of changes to your governing Act. If the Act conflicts with your constitution, the Act wins. As such, you need to do a review every now and then and make sure your constitution is up to date. It's crucial that board members are clear about the organisation's purpose. Take a moment to reflect on whether or not you personally can clearly articulate your organisation's purpose. Mission drift can be extremely destructive. Knowing and articulating your organisation's purpose and using it to guide your decision-making guards against this. A little tip, include your mission statement at the top of your meeting agenda to remind you when you are making decisions. In arts organisations, your purpose or mission may overlap with or impact upon your artistic vision. As a board member, you must be clear on that as well. The solar system notion. Everything must emanate from and revolve around the artistic vision. That is, the artistic vision must be central to the board and its decision-making, central to governance, central to management. The board must understand and be able to discuss the artistic vision, but the board should never tip over into artistic interference. The board does not own the artistic vision, but it must ensure that the artistic vision drives its strategy. This topic is covered in much greater depth in the workshop. So why you must be clear about your purpose and artistic vision. It will bind your organisation around a common clear objective. How can the board drive success if we don't know what success looks like? It helps if you know to whom, where and how to pitch for funding and support, and from whom to accept funding and support. If you don't bring your purpose to life succinctly, you may be confused with an organisation that looks and feels like you. To ensure you're making the right decisions, does it fit with your purpose? Does it fit with your artistic vision? We should be making informed decisions. How can we do that if we don't know we exist? What is the difference between governance and management? Governance is about setting the direction. Management is about implementing the direction. For the board, that means nose in and fingers out. Where does the artistic director fit into this? Not all arts organisations will have an artistic director, but all will have that function. This is a crucial point of difference between arts organisations and other not-for-profit organisations. All organisations have a mission, but in arts organisations, the artistic vision is additional to and intertwined with that. The board should set structure of review at all levels and clearly separate board and management processes. You can do that by using a board and CEO relationship policy. We know that good boards have active engagement with management and staff, but that this is done in an open and structured manner using policy and delegations. Similarly, board members should know that one person's opinion, a rumour, should not get into the boardroom. If you are leaning over the freezer in the supermarket and you're approached by a member of staff or their cousin who wants to moan about the CEO or AD or about a performance, this shouldn't be taken as gospel. There should be a formal process for complaints or grievances to get to the boardroom. The board should assess its own performance and have a structure to fairly assess the CEO and AD. Of course, not-for-profit organisations are different to other organisations in many ways. For example, mission versus profit, stakeholders or members versus owners. They sell impact in exchange for funding versus selling products or service, though not-for-profits may sell products or services as well. And it follows that not-for-profit boards are different as well, but the legal obligations of board members are the same. Some of you may have heard of the National Safety Council case. This case is significant for not-for-profits because for the first time, a director was held personally liable for the negligence of the board. That is to say, for the first time, the board member of a not-for-profit organisation was found liable for the debts of the organisation for breaching directors' duties. Prior to this case, many people thought that not-for-profit board members were somehow immune from the standards expected of corporate directors. With the national safety case, that misconception was busted. Now, none of this is to say that you should be putting off getting on or being on a board, but it's now clear that you must be aware of your obligations. So what are your obligations? Near enough, these duties apply to you whatever your organisation's legal form. That is, they apply to board members whether your organisation is a company, an association or a co-op, and whatever state or territory you operate in. We could talk about each of these duties in turn for hours, but in this webinar we have time to home in on only a few. Please do not be intimidated by these duties. If you go into your role on a board with good intent and you ask questions, you're going to meet them. So here's how you can make sure you meet your duty to act with care, skill and diligence. Can you tick all of these boxes currently? Maintain appropriate levels of skill. Receive regular reporting. Question management and record responses. Exercise independent judgment at all times. Act honestly. Ensure you have sufficient information. Don't be afraid to be a stick in the mud where appropriate. And if the matter is significant, seek expert advice. Some of these we'll talk about further along in the webinar. Board members must exercise their powers and discharge their duties with the care and diligence of a reasonable person in their position. In general terms, you will meet the duty of care and diligence if you make a decision to take or not to take action in good faith and for profit purpose, and you do not have any material personal interest in the matter, and you inform yourself about the matter to the extent you reasonably believe is appropriate, and reasonably believe that your judgment is in the board's best interest. So, duty to make an informed decision. Informed decision making is very important. If you miss things that you should have considered, you are leaving yourself open to breaching your duties. This is true whatever the context of the decision you are contemplating, as part of a board meeting, a working group, or a subcommittee. After this webinar, we will send you a link to the ICTA decision-making tool that's up on the screen. The process laid out in this tool asks you to step through a number of key points which will help you minimise the risk of missing something you should have considered. It covers things like the background to the issue, timeframe considerations, options including making no decision, benefits and costs of each option and their relevance to the organisation's mission, consultation, decision-making criteria, whether it's financial considerations, social implications, etc., and risks. Ideally, all of these things should be addressed in the briefing paper you receive as part of your board papers. If not, you need to be asking these questions either before or during the meeting. Once you get in the habit of running through this list, it will become second nature. We'll look at meeting processes in our next free webinar. That's going to be held on Tuesday, May the 22nd, and registrations are open for that. So we've talked about the National Safety Council case. Now I want to talk a bit about the Centro case. Centro is another case where the court found the directors had breached their duties. The case itself was about misclassification of money, but the actual details of the case aren't of interest to us here. We're more interested in the findings of the court, because what the court made clear was how important information gathering is and how important it is that board members understand the finances. What's clear from the Centro case is that you cannot absolve yourself from responsibility just because you didn't like or didn't question the information that was fed to you. You need to inform yourself. The lessons from the Centro case are understand basic finance and strategy. Examine your board's decision-making processes. Participate in meetings and other decision-making processes. Review your board's information flows. Too little, too much. Know what you can and can't delegate. So let's talk a little more about delegations. You may delegate to individuals or committees responsibility for carrying out board directions. Example, to investigate a particular course of action, to pay for things within the bounds of preset limits. You can't or you shouldn't delegate decision-making to management. Your board should have a clear delegations policy and process in place. We'll send you a link to a template policy in case you don't have one. Appropriate delegation includes proper minutes. Everything should be written down, no verbal delegations, including the boundaries of any delegation the board sets. When delegating to a subcommittee, ensure a robust appointment process. Get reports and follow up. Assess periodically, as in member makeup, who's actually on the committee, boundaries of authority, and the need for the committee itself. So this is a quote from the court in the Centro case. Key points to note: the board members must be able to read and understand the financial papers. These four points are what we would consider the most basic level of financial understanding that needs to be present in each director. If you're not up to scratch, you can download Damn Good Advice for Board Directors, which is available free from the ICTA website, and we'll send you the direct link following this webinar. Look out for Not-for-Profit Finance Week, which our community runs with the Commonwealth Bank. It's coming up in September, and it includes a series of free webinars that might be useful if you feel your financial literacy could do with a tune-up. If you're a member of our community, you receive advice on how to book for these, or you can watch the webpage. What Centro also made clear is that you can't just turn up to meetings, though you do need to turn up. You must properly participate. That means you need to ensure you understand your organisation's decision-making processes. What are the rules? What are the unspoken conventions and politics behind the rules? Read the papers. It's imperative that you're properly prepared. Ensure those who know about topics are well prepared for the meeting. For example, the Treasurer needs to be able to explain the financial papers to the rest of the board. Encourage those who know least about topics to speak up at the board meetings. Ask the dumb questions. Often they're questions that everyone is wondering about but doesn't want to appear silly. Another couple of Centro quotes. We talked a moment ago about the importance of reading the meeting papers. But what if the meeting papers aren't very informative, or if they're too long-winded, or don't contain enough or the right sort of information? What Centro made clear is that it's no excuse to say you didn't like the information that you're given, or you couldn't understand the information you were given. The board and individual board members are in control of the information they receive. If it's too little or too much, or in a format you find hard to understand, get it in a manner that you need. If you don't like it, fix it. If you can't fix it, get off the board. So what does insolvent training mean? Being unable to pay your debts as and when they fall due. You need to monitor your organisation's cash flow. When you make a decision on expenditure, you need to be able to predict that you can pay it when it falls due. You need to know what's coming in, when, and what's going out. Even if the organisation was solvent at the time of incurring the debt, an offence is committed if the organisation becomes insolvent by incurring the debt in question. So what are your duties? Insolvent trading provisions compel board members not to allow the organisation to trade while insolvent, and not to allow the organisation to become insolvent. You will breach this duty if you fail to prevent your organisation from incurring a debt when a reasonable board member would have been able to be aware that there were reasonable grounds for suspecting the organisation's debts could not be paid as and when they fell due. A conflict of interest occurs when a person who is part of the decision-making process is considering an issue in which they or a close family member stand to benefit in some way. A conflict of interest is not a problem in itself or something to feel shame about, but it must be acknowledged and managed. Even the perception of a conflict of interest can be damaging to your own personal reputation as a board member and to the reputation of your board and the organisation it governs. The issue, even if it involves something small or an amount quite small, can very quickly blow out of control and cause massive damage. So what constitutes a conflict of interest? Here are the four most common types. Self-dealing, in which you as a board member or employee are effectively negotiating with yourself as a contractor or a supplier over how much of the organisation's money you shall get. For example, where an organisation enters into a contract with a board member's private company. Outside employment, in which the interests of another position overrides your duty to further the interests of the organisation you are serving as a board member. For example, where you use the knowledge and connections or time gained from your board position to boost the fortunes of a project you're involved with elsewhere. Family interests, in which you arrange to have your spouse, your child, or another close relative hired by the organisation, or you arrange for the organisation to purchase goods or services from such a relative or a firm they control. Accepting inducements in the form of gifts, bribes or favours. For example, where organisational supplies are more expensive at one supplier than another, but the purchasing officer chooses a more expensive supplier in return for free movie tickets or other incentives. It's unreasonable to expect that a board can completely avoid conflicts of interest. You probably recruit people onto your board because of their skills, experience and connections into the arts industry. So it's likely that your organisation's work will bump against theirs from time to time. There's nothing wrong with that. What's important is how any conflict of interest is managed. So let's look at how. So 1, a register of interests. Ask each board member to note their businesses, memberships, employment and voluntary work. 2, declare the interests. At the start of each board meeting, the chair should ask board members to declare any interest in relation to any items on the agenda. 3, do not wield undue influence. Board members with a conflict of interest may, unless your rules forbid it, give their opinion on the matter if asked or required to do so, but should not seek to influence the decision. 4, excuse yourself from the decision-making process. Do not vote on the issue. If appropriate, if an item is particularly contentious, remove yourself from the room entirely during the vote. Do not take part in implementation of the decision. And lastly, keep records. You must note for the minutes any interests that are declared and any actions refraining from voting or leaving the room that a meeting participant takes. Check the minutes to ensure it's all been documented correctly. As well as your duties as a director, you need to be aware of the multitude of other laws your organisation may be subject to. We've listed on this slide a selection of these, but there will be others related to your organisation's particular context. How do you, a board member, know the organisation is compliant? You need a compliance register. This involves noting all of the laws that apply to your organisation, pulling them apart to show what the obligations are, then noting actions the organisation needs to take in order to comply. The compliance task may be carried out by staff members or even a volunteer, but the board needs to be satisfied that compliance is occurring. You need to ask questions. So now it's time for reflection and an action plan. So what did I learn? What do I need to do now? Is there anything I need to brush up on? So we've got workshops. The Arts Governance Program includes in-depth, tailored one-day arts governance training for board members and CEOs, MDs and ADs. They're being held across the country over the next 18 months or so. You can see the website for details. We'll also be sending you the links that are on this page. More webinars to explore other topics. Keep an eye on the webinars. There will be new ones posted soon and previous ones will be available for viewing. Explore the free help sheets and templates available at the ICTA website. You may consider becoming a member if you would like to access the forum and receive the quarterly governance newsletters. For feedback, you'll receive an email with a link to a feedback survey as soon as the webinar finishes. Please complete it while it's fresh in your mind. The email will also contain all of the links I've referred to throughout this webinar. So now it's time for some questions. So start typing them in and I'll start answering. The Act So from Sarah, what is the Act? What is this document that informs our Constitution, and where can we get a copy? So it depends on your state. So in Victoria, if you're an association, it's the Associations and Corporations Act, the Reform Act of 2012. So for the specifics, you can go to your regulator's website and they'll be able to guide you in the right direction there. So another question that I've received is, our board is getting burnt out. We have subcommittees but only have board members on them. So thanks for that one. What you can do, really, you only need to have one board member on your subcommittees. So if the board member is the chair, then there's a natural link back to the board and the direction of the subcommittee. The integrity of that is held. So apart from that board member who's chairing the subcommittee, you can bring on whoever you think has the skills and experience and knowledge to serve that subcommittee. So you can get, you know, if you need marketing skills, then you can access those and bring those in. So depends on the subcommittee, but yeah, definitely can draw in from your member base, from your volunteers, from staff members, from just community members who you think will be able to assist you. So the difference between members and co-opted members, this can vary between organisations. So if you're talking about more board members, so board members are, well, your members are your members of your organisation, and then your members, in most cases, your board is elected from your members, but not always, as we touched on earlier. So co-opted members on your board are people that you've brought in, that it's sort of like giving it a try. You're trying them out and they're trying you out. So usually you co-opt them for the skills that they have to offer. So I've got another one here. Should staff and management also be on subcommittees? Yeah, I think that there's some that staff and management are crucial to be on. However, it's still up to individual organisations. But like, for example, a finance subcommittee, I would be expecting the CEO, or if you've got a chief financial officer, then that staff member to be on that subcommittee. So yeah, definitely. And if you've got a marketing subcommittee and you've got staff members who look after that area, then definitely bring them to be involved as well. So I've been asked, how can I get hold of the resource that was put up, the decision-making tool? So we will make that available to you, that you will be sent the link so that you can access that. So I've had another question about the decision-making tool. The decision-making tool, you can utilise that, and then that becomes your briefing paper when a board is making a decision. So you may set up a working group or give the decision-making tool to a subcommittee to work through, to look at all the options and to tease out all those options. So, and then that decision-making tool, once it's completed, that goes out with the meeting papers a week prior to the meeting, and so that all the board can be fully aware of the decision to be made and all the options to be considered. And it usually contains a recommendation as well. So how many artists should we have on the board? This one again is up to individuals. And it used to be that there were, well, in the past, there were often all artists on the boards, because they came up from the artists. The organisation started by a group of artists. So what then was found in some cases was that with the responsibilities of being a board member, they actually take up a fair bit of time, especially in some cases where the subcommittees aren't set up and utilising external people. Then the board members were finding that they were having their artistic time taken away from them. So it depends on your organisation. Your artistic director should be. We recommend they are on the board. However, after that, it really is up to your board how many you have and from what type of artists they are. We do cover this in much more detail at the workshop, so I recommend if you're wanting to investigate that quite thoroughly, then come along to one of the workshops. Just got another question here. So small organisations treat the model rules as a guide, but don't allow it to be restrictive. Is this okay? Well, it is a legal document, and it does the model rules. The model rules are basically telling you that if you adopt the model rules as they are, if you adopt us, that's what they're telling you, if you adopt us as your rules, you will be meeting your obligations under the Act. What they're not telling you is that they may not be the best rules for you. So I'm not sure what I'm seeing that there can be a couple of different takes on this question. So I'm taking it as you have your set of rules and you use the model rules as a guide, you don't adopt it as is. So if that's what you're saying, then yes, that is what a lot of organisations do. Because as I said, the model rules are not always the best rules for your organisation. As long as you're meeting your obligations within the Act, if one thing to remember is if you're silent on anything that the Act that is in the model rules, then you will be legally held to the model rules to make sure that you are meeting your obligations under the Act. So I hope I've made that clear. If not, please put forward another question, and I'll have another go. So are there organisations where the board has a role in artistic governance, or should the organisation draw this line? We recommend the board draw the line. You have an artistic director, and that is their role. The board are usually not. Then that isn't their role to set the artistic direction. Their role is to make sure that they have somebody setting the artistic direction. So their role is to make sure that that is covered, whether by employing an artistic director or having an artistic director in place, or making sure that the CEO is also doing that combined role. So, or the managing director is doing that combined role. So, yeah, so we do recommend that it is not tried to be dealt with by the board. We have another question coming in. So if you go back to one of those slides, I'm sure we put it much more succinctly than I did, and in that that we don't encourage or, you know, boards really shouldn't interfere in the artistic direction. They should look after the governance. So should the board set the mission? Yes, in consultation with stakeholders. So you need to make sure that you're hearing the voice of your stakeholders and your members. But yes, the board are in charge of making sure that the mission is set, that it's followed. Well, you know, that their decisions follow their mission, and they're the protectors of the mission as well. So they really need to be the ones that make sure that they take the overarching view, while, you know, their staff and management are are busy doing the actions and the operations, making sure that that the organisation is following the directions set by the mission. Okay, so I'll wrap it up there. We've covered all the questions that have come in, so thank you for your time, and you'll see the links up coming up on the page now. So the Australia Council link and ICTA. But as I said, you will receive an email with all the links that have been covered in this website. So thank you. Have a great day.